welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Hope you've all enjoyed the lunch and are feeling refreshed and revitalised, ready for the afternoon. You certainly soon will be, because, as you can see, we've got a real treat in store to get going. First up, we're being taken on an adventure into the sort of topical but often misunderstood area of qualitative analysis and AI in qualitative analysis. So the use of computers in qualitative analysis has got a lengthy history, more than 30 years, and ever since those first programs in the mid to late 80s, there's been a lot of discussion about the implications on quality, on process, around qualitative research. The rise of generative AI, especially over the past 18 months, has raised the stakes around that discussion to new levels. And it's that which our speakers, Christina Silver and Steve Wright, are going to be discussing today. Both have been involved in this field for many years. Christina is currently the director of CAQDAS networking project at the University of Surrey, which since '94 has been raising awareness and building capacity in methodologically grounded computer-assisted qualitative analysis across sectors. She's written several textbooks and numerous publications on this topic. Steve has taught university courses in computer-assisted qualitative analysis for 10 years. He's developed several exemplars for using qualitative software for different methodological applications for SAGE, and he's recently taken up a senior lectureship in medical education at the University of Central Lancashire. Together, they're no less than globally renowned for the depth and breadth of expertise they hold in qualitative software tools. And today, they're inviting us to think critically about the good, the bad, and the ugly of AI in qualitative analysis. So get the questions into Hoover as we go. This is half an hour. We've got 10 minutes for questions at the end. I'm sure there'll be loads. Look forward to them. Christina and Steve, wonderful to have you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Okay, so hi everyone. So this is a hot topic and a controversial one that we're going to be speaking to you about, how the rise of generative AI is impacting on the process of qualitative research. We're going to touch on the whole research cycle, but we're going to focus most of our attention on the analysis process and specifically the use of technology in that process. And there's much hype around the use of AI, headlines heralding the amazing things that it's going to do for us, but equally lots and lots of doom and gloom about what awaits us, what the dangers are that await us. And the world as we know it definitely is changing, and qualitative research is not immune. But how is the qualitative community, Steve, reacting to this?
I think there's a lot of this going on, but we don't think this is a particularly good response, and actually engaging and being critical is important. So what are we talking about? Well, we're focusing on software primarily. How have you used software to analyze qualitative data or text? So this spans quite a range. We've got tools for computational linguistics and natural language processing, and those generally were about looking at the form of language. So there might have been some coding or tagging in that, but it was often for parts of speech, trying to automate that. Is it a noun, a pronoun? And then being able to produce statistical models of language in order to, for example, find out why do we say the quick brown fox, not the brown quick fox, and then use that for language teaching and so on. Now, those tools have also been used in text mining and content analysis. So that's about looking at often large corpora of text and saying, right, how often, which newspapers and which kinds of articles use what language about perhaps which ethnic groups. So you would be looking at patterns of language there. Also things like sentiment analysis. So if you have customer feedback or staff survey feedback, seeing that not bad, well, that's positive. Just because it's got the word bad in it doesn't mean it's negative. So that's your sentiment analysis. Now, qualitative analysis software, which you'll probably know as things like NVivo, Quirkos, Atlas TI, MaxQDA, That's software that has been developed by qualitative researchers to help with qualitative interpretation of the meaning of qualitative data. So you might be coding, for example, the previous headlines, are they a booster discourse or are they doomsters? Or how is a narrative of inevitability being constructed? Now, of course, a lot of this has always been done just in Word, in Excel. And these tools are starting to incorporate new things. Now, for some of you, will be too young, but some of you will be able to cast your mind back to Clippy, who used to pop up as soon as you wrote "Dear," it would go, "Oh, it looks like you're writing a letter. Can I help?" Now, as far as I know, it didn't pop up and say, "Oh, it looks like you're doing a qualitative analysis. Would you like me to find some themes for you?" But more recently, we've had ChatGPT explode onto the scene, and this is being incorporated into Office software, along with things like automatic transcription. But ChatGPT has this conversational interface, and it's kind of like a sort of super Clippy that is now going, "Hi, I can summarize anything. Would you like me to find some themes in that? Would you like me to tag it?" So this is very new, but we're seeing some old patterns. So, Christina, when has this been happening?
Okay, so the first qualitative software programs are ones that we're talking about in terms of interpreting meaning, NVivo, Quirkos, things like that. I know that some of you have been using those because some of you filled out the poll. They arrived on the scene in the mid-1980s. And they've been around for a long, long time. This is not new technology. But that controversy has always been there. There's always been worries about using technology. And a paper by Jackson et al. In 2008 characterized the concerns about the use of technology for interpretive qualitative analysis in 4 different ways. And that's something that we've been debating in the field for a long time. There's basically 3 camps. There's the advocates, those who use technology. There's the critics, those who are concerned about using technology. And then there's a whole bunch of people who are doing qualitative analysis without knowing that there's bespoke tools out there to be used. But over the years, things have changed and a range of tools have become available. The very first intelligent qualitative software programs first came onto the scene in 1999, which Steve reliably told me over lunch that's 1/4 of a century ago, which some of us might be quite surprised about. Okay, and those tools, as he mentioned, incorporated things like topic modeling, sentiment analysis, and so on. But really, things are changing very dramatically over the last 18 months. Since OpenAI released ChatGPT. And there really has been an explosion of generative AI in all of our lives, in many aspects of the world, but also into qualitative. And that's what we want to focus on now. How that's happened is in 3 key ways, or 3 genres, if you like. So many qualitative researchers are using ChatGPT and other similar chatbots to do various aspects of their qualitative research. There are integrations into some of those established qualitative software programs, most notably Atlas TI and MaxQDA at the moment. And then there are literally dozens and dozens and dozens of new apps which have exploded onto the scene in the last 18 months that are incorporating different aspects of generative AI. And what we want to do this afternoon is to think about those in 5 key ways. So 5 kind of key activities, generative AI activities, that we are going to be focusing on today. And you can see them. We're going to take them through and think about how it impacts on the qualitative research process.
So if we've got these 5 areas, how are they being sold to us?
Okay, so there's different ways in which the tools are being marketed to us. CoLoop is one of those new apps. Some of you may be aware of it. And here we're being told that lots and lots of time is going to be saved. So we're going to free up lots of times, but also hidden themes that we haven't seen before are going to reveal themselves to us through these technologies. We also have something similar from Atlas TI in terms of light speed insights that we're now going to be able to find, and this is going to revolutionize what we've been doing up until now. CAQDAS takes a slightly more considered approach, maybe, still focusing on speed, but in terms of what that enables us as the humans to do that we weren't able to do before. Okay, what we're going to do then is think about the qualitative research process, and we're going to map onto that those 5 activities. And you will see that each of those activities, generate, converse, summarize, speech to text, and label, can be potentially used at various different stages of the qualitative research process.
Which has created an incredibly complicated diagram. So I want to take this to a slightly simpler model. This is everything you want to get done in life, okay? So I like to call it the impossible triangle. And so think about anything, right? You want to get your car fixed. You want a good quality job done quickly. It's going to cost you money because it's going to take 5 mechanics and prioritization. Don't have the money, so I'd like a good quality job done cheap, please. That's going to take time because it's going to be your mate at the garage fitting it in around everything else, which is why we have such a plethora of a quick job done cheap. But you know the cost. It's going to be shoddy.
All right, let's pick this apart in terms of our first activity, which is going to be speech to text. As I'm sure many of you who are qualitative researchers will know, that the transcription process has historically been a very lengthy one, but now we have automated transcription, which up until about a year or so ago wasn't really that accurate, but now is being integrated into lots of different qualitative software programs, but also lots of free transcription tools are available out there. 2 examples which have taken seriously the 3 considerations of accuracy, speed, and security of our data are up here, Transana and Quirkos. But Steve, how does this look in terms of your triangle?
So with speech to text, I think the first things that I encountered was a lot of people who they thought this would be a real compromise on quality. So you're just going to use the automatic stuff and you're going to ignore it. But with a good interface, actually, I've seen a huge improvement in quality because it's centered voice again. So people are now looking at a transcript synchronized with the words and are able to go back and listen to the words as they're reading the transcript. So that's improved quality. It's brought back nuance. Yes, with time, it's sped things up a lot. So that could be time to think, but it could also just change expectations and think, oh, well, it doesn't take long now. And that change of expectations is where you start coming to costs. So yes, there are human transcribers who are going to lose their jobs. Where does the data go? If you're getting this for free, you are the product and your data is the product being sold. And there is a real concern with marginalization here and normalization. So I guess the comedy example is the first round, the classic Michael Gove saying there's no way this country can ever allow Batman to be our prime minister. I think we'd all wish he was in the running. The TV debates would be way more fun. But actually, if you can listen to it at the time and synchronize it to, you can correct it and go, actually, it was that man. But this is where the serious issue of the power use is coming in. So AI is using enormous amounts of drinking water and enormous amounts of power. And the people who are going to feel the effects from the climate change of that first are those whose languages are not represented. The Global South does not get to use these tools because most languages that aren't European aren't represented.
Okay, let's move it on to our next activity, okay, which is converse. And this is where a lot of the focus, a lot of the hype has been happening in the last 18 months. And we now do have ChatGPT kind of interfaces within qualitative software programs. Here's one example from Coloop, when you can have a conversational chat with your data in the interface, and that can be linked back to the original transcripts where it's coming from afterwards. And that's in a conversational display, similar to what you've seen in ChatGPT and others. But we can also get that in a more comparative display. So asking a question and then having the answer given back to us, comparing different interviewees, for example, or groups of participants, and so on. So, Steve, was it a triangle or was it a more complicated?
No, still sticking with triangles and conversing. So this has been the kind of thing that's really kicked this into the public sphere. So where's the quality? Well, potentially, click next.
Sorry.
Potentially, it could be a really intuitive assistant. If you could have natural language querying, so you're actually going, can you compare this group with this group? That's fantastic. It's way easier. If you've ever tried to write regular expressions to search for text, it's hard. And that simplicity could increase accessibility. You can do more without having to learn the coding. So an actually intuitive interface, brilliant. That's why people like ChatGPT. Quick querying, that could be absolutely fantastic. But there are still costs here. So it has this illusion of understanding. If you're conversing with something, it seems to know what it's talking about. It's devaluing the interpreter. It's you who's doing the interpretation. And there's a big question about whose work is it using in this. So we've had quite powerful people exploding onto the scene. Just recently, Scarlett Johansson, Sony Music saying, hang on, you're using my IP. But there are lots and lots of voices silenced who don't know if their data has been scraped and used. And yeah, that's been very, very obfuscated. We don't know what it's trained on. So Christina.
Okay, so our next activity is summarize. And this is another massive, big capability that has huge implications on what we might want to do with qualitative materials, in the sense that we can ask generative AI to very, very quickly summarize large quantities of data for us. And that can happen in many different ways. Here's an example from CAQDAS, whereby you can ask the tool to summarize an interview transcript, for example. You can also ask for a summary of a selected text segment of your choosing. You can also, if you've done some qualitative coding previously, you can ask it to summarize the segments that you've previously coded to a particular code. So here's an example of a code, free time self-care, and that can be summarized. So integrating the coding work that you might have done previously with the summarization. Let's go back to the triangle, Steve. I know that you love a triangle.
Yes. So with quality, we're talking here about an algorithmic extension of you. So that could really help you see more quite quickly. But one of the key things of quality in qualitative research is, what does it mean and why does it matter? So yes, on time, this allows us potentially to get very, very rapid summaries, quite often large documents. That could be early on, sense-making, getting a sense of all of this data. That's great. Some quick overviews and some quick sense-making. But there are still really potential issues with costs, because what this is summarizing is form, not meaning. So there's this idea of a documentation debt. We don't really know what this has been trained on. It isn't documented, it's all very much a black box. And there are some ethical implications as well. So we'll come back to hallucinations in a bit. But what's the point of summarizing, say, a staff survey? You've got your staff survey, you put it into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize. Well, the point is usually to try and find not just the average, but the needle in the haystack. And if you're talking about things like staff surveys or customer surveys and customer feedback, then what if that's not a needle, but a whistleblower in the haystack, and it just got lost as you asked for a quick summary? That's the meaning you're looking for.
Okay, you mentioned hallucinations, and I did a very sort of weird thing, and I asked ChatGPT what I was known for, and it told me a bunch of lies. If you read this, which I recommend you don't, but if you do, it sounds very, very plausible, but it is not true. I did not develop NVivo, and that acronym is not even the correct acronym for NVivo. So what happens when we have to spend a lot of time interpreting whether it's telling us the truth or not? Okay, that gets us on to one of your favorite topics, Steve, labeling. Okay, so qualitative researchers will think of labeling as coding. Okay, we used to, back in the day, do it in hard copy with highlighter pens and such. Then we had software that allowed us to do that electronically, and also allowed us to look at the patterns and relationships between those codes, both quantitatively and qualitatively. This is what we're talking about, and now we have AI that can do this for us.
Welcome to the future of qualitative data analysis with Atlas TI groundbreaking intentional AI coding powered by OpenAI. Atlas TI has created questions based on your intent. We'll check your documents paragraph by paragraph and use these questions to find relevant codes. You can always go ahead and edit all of them and let the AI do its job. Once the AI processes your documents, you can review the generated codes. Apply them with confidence, knowing they're backed by both AI precision and your human perspective.
Okay, Steve, I sense that you're getting a bit more troubled with your triangle now.
Definitely. I mean, I think there's something key here with labeling. So, I mean, I thought it was ironic that it's talking about carbon footprint reduction strategies. It's like, yeah, and you're burning how much to do that? But we've got this idea that if you've got supervised learning or machine learning, so you are supervising it, you are doing some work and then asking a machine to say, can you look at the rest of my data and find data that looks similar? And I will review it and go, actually, yes, that's fantastic. Currently, that's quite complex to do, quite complex to learn. So you could have explicit large language models where it's clear what it's doing, and it's clear what it's trained on, and you've done some training, with relevant training data and ethical training data. So there's this idea of fairly trained coming in, certification for that. But text labeling is the result of you looking at concrete concepts, and if it's precise, you should be able to get at that. So this should be working at scale, and it should be working at speed. Currently, that's not quite the case. That will get fixed. But the developers are putting their time into this. Is this a problem we had and we wanted to be fixed? This idea of clarity, reliability, and this is where hallucinations become even more problematic, because this is now codes being generated for you. So what it should be really good at is words, yeah? Okay, so I had this interaction with Copilot. It gave me some text. I said, how many words in the previous thing have 2 letter T's in it? And it came up saying, so how many letter T's are there in the word interface? Because it put it in the list. The word interface contains 2 instances of the letter T. So I asked, where are those 2 instances? I wondered, was it like the Yorkshire training data set? It's like, it's interface. No, it reliably informed me that the 2 instances of the letter T are at positions 4 and 7, and this is the XKCD model. So this is your machine learning system. Yep, pour it in, loads of maths, linear algebra, and you get the answer on the other side. And if they're wrong, just stir it again until they look right. So that's something it should be bang on, and it's getting that really wrong. So what's happening when it's way more complex? These are real issues.
Okay, so I think we've established that there are some issues with what it gives us, which brings us on to the generate in generative AI. And we want to pick out this activity in terms of data collection for you this afternoon. You may be aware, you may not, but we can now have the AI doing our interviews for us. Here's a WhatsApp interview app. This is an AI having a conversation with a real person on WhatsApp as an interview. And we also have that using a bot.
Let's start with the first question. What factors are most important to you when buying food, particularly regarding health and nutrition?
I exercise a lot, so I don't really care about the health and nutrition of my food.
Do you feel that your exercise routine allows you to prioritize taste and convenience over health and nutrition when making food choices?
Absolutely. I generally just focus on eating enough carbohydrates so I can take my intense exercises and do my long runs.
Okay, I'll stop that because I know that you're chomping at the bit, Steve.
So generating, I struggled on quality. I mean, I think there is something important here. Algorithmic summaries of our data are going to be generated. This is going to happen more and more. So understanding what is being summarized as either a counterpoint. Often, if you're doing a PhD, people say, get a critical friend. This is like the world's least critical friend. And it gives you some insights into what AI is going to summarize this data as. So yes, that might save some time, but there are suggestions it could be used as a substitute. Oh, we'll get ChatGPT to pretend to be a synthetic subject. This is getting really problematic. So we've come into the costs. I was thinking about paradigm wars, the SoCal on steroids kind of thing. Come back to deepfakes, but I just ended up with a massive steaming pile of horse manure because that seemed to be more succinct. But
Okay, before I get on to the idea of qualitative deepfake, let's talk very briefly about fabrications. So recently on LinkedIn, an academic noticed somebody else had fabricated citations that they had apparently written, and it had got through peer review. I don't know about you, but I think that's hugely problematic. And that brings me on to the idea of qualitative deepfake. Okay? It is now possible that a whole qualitative research project from start to finish can be done entirely using AI with no or minimal human input. What do we think about that as social scientists who are trying to have an impact with the results of our studies?
So you might be thinking, hang on, wasn't your analogy about a cowboy film and you've been talking about triangles the whole way through, but it's just trying to bring it back together and synthesize. So I think we can see quality. Quality is the good. That is what we have to be looking for. And we have to be ensuring that any use of AI tools is about the good and the quality. Now, just positioning time as the problem to be fixed, that is pretty bad. It's not always that. Scale, maybe. Other things like that could be good, but just time is what we've got to fix is a problem. And I think some of the costs we've outlined here really are ugly. So we're talking really about values. And if you'll forgive me the PowerPoint karaoke, but I will read this out without music or drinking, sorry. If you put enough training data into a large language model, it can spit out text on any topic. And so you can easily fool yourself into thinking that it can do something useful on that topic. But as soon as the outcome matters, as soon as the truthfulness and groundedness of that text matters to anybody, it's clear that it can't. So when does it matter?
So for me, the outcome matters always when I'm doing a qualitative research project, and that's because ethics are everywhere, and anywhere. Okay? And I think that's really the crux of what we are talking about today. You may be thinking that Steve and I are quite critical about the role of AI in qualitative research. Actually, we're quite excited about the possibilities. It's just that at the moment, we believe that the form in which it's being provided and the way it's being marketed to us and how the developments are happening, the ethics around that are problematic. But I think we are quite excited about the potential opportunities in the future, and we do think it will get better and be useful. So really our aim today has been to emphasize what some of those issues are really, and to open up what I think is the crux of what we all do when we do qualitative research, which is to think critically about what we're doing at every stage of the process. There was some discussion this morning about robustness of what we do as social researchers, and I think that's the crux of everything. So the way that we go about our whole qualitative research process, we need to be thinking about, and it's never been more important to think about the role of technology in the process. So what does that mean in essence then, Steve?
Well, we thought we had to give you a takeaway. So if this is the one takeaway we're going to give you, if you've got a parrot, it might be a very clever parrot, it might have a lot of words, just be more pirate. So whenever you see AI-generated text, you know, don't just look up at it, wow, it's amazing, it's so clever. Get out an eye patch, put on your hat, read it out in the voice of a parrot to remind yourself what this thing is. That parrot might be very clever and giving you a great summary, but it is a parrot. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely fantastic. And excuse me while I parrot the questions that have been coming to you. A couple of linked ones, and actually, you know, this is sort of anticipating the integration of this into organizations more. So how do you navigate challenges to getting approval for AI and cloud-based software with organizations that are risk-averse and resistant to change? And relatedly, how can the use of AI in qualitative analysis be aligned with researchers' data protection obligations?
So I think that's to do with what the aim is. So if you're trying to persuade the powers that be to use some form of AI, then you need to be very clear in your own mind about why it is that you want to use it, because that's the basis of making good arguments for using it. But it's also about really understanding the technicality of what's actually happening, because that's where I think a lot of the data security concerns come from, is the kind of black box idea, the idea that we don't actually know what's happening to our data when we upload it to the cloud, if we're using a tool that does that. So it's about two things, really, thinking about why do you want to use AI in your qualitative research process? It shouldn't be just because you can. That should never be the reason, I don't think. So as soon as you know what the reasons are, then that's the first part. But then you have to fully understand how it works to be able to persuade people who are resistant to change or are concerned about ethics or security to buy into it.
From a professional point of view, sort of professional protection point of view, there's a question, do you think that there's a risk to researchers in terms of AI replacing research jobs and roles in organizations?
I think there's a risk that the hype will be bought into, and I think that's a real concern. The idea that we don't need human transcribers anymore. It's like, well, you've still got to listen to the whole thing and correct it if you want to know it's correct. So, yes, it's a bit quicker than doing it manually, but that hasn't replaced that need. That would be my worry, is that genuinely that people are, oh, right, well, AI can summarize it. It's like, yeah, AI can summarize the form, but not the meaning. And so that, to me, is the argument that we need to be, it's why we shouldn't be sticking our heads in the sand. We need to engage with that aspect.
And someone else related is saying, you know, their concern is that the quicker things that can be done, then, you know, as that happens more, the more commissioners and funders will put pressure on qualitative researchers. So tell us more about the argument back.
I mean, so one of the arguments, like, is people say, well, if we improve the data that it's trained on, it will be better. So they've done a deal with the FT. We're going to use the FT because that's authoritative data. It's still making papier-mâché. If you make papier-mâché out of the FT, it isn't smarter papier-mâché than from the National Enquirer. It's still a mixture of stuff. So there is something about meaning. Do you want to know the meaning, or do you want a statistical summary of an overview? That's not the same thing.
But that raises the idea of what is qualitative research. Qualitative research is not a homogeneous thing. So there's a huge variety of what is doing. When you say I'm doing a qualitative research project, that can mean a number of very different things. So I think the answer to quite a lot of these questions is it depends on what type of research you're doing. And I think, you know, something that we didn't really talk about today is that there are certain types of qualitative research when certain types of AI tools are appropriate, and others when the same tool absolutely isn't. So I think it's very contextual in that sense as well.
Does that make it impossible for you to answer the question, what does AI do well and which platforms do it best? Or could you give...
Well, we could answer that question, but we would need quite a long time to answer that question because it's quite involved. But I think, you know, before you use any tool, whether it's AI tool or not, you should understand how it's been developed, by whom it's been developed, and how it works. And if you're just going to use a tool blindly without knowing those things, then I think that opens up a can of worms that we you know, that's not good enough in terms of the values of who we are, not just as qualitative researchers, but as social researchers more generally.
So I think what Quirkos have done, for example, with the speech-to-text shows one way that there is a new implementation, it's open source, you know what's going on, you know where your data goes, you can choose your data security. That wasn't available initially because everyone who was doing it was offering it free, and your data was the product being sold. I think if we start seeing fairly trained AI tools where we know what it was trained on and it's recoverable what it did, I mean, I'd love to be able to use SPSS with ChatGPT because I don't really know what I'm doing. But if I could say, can you compare this group and then tell me how you did it, that would be amazing. That interface could be so useful. But at the moment, what you do is you put it in a black box and it stirs that algebra and goes, there, does that look right? And you're like, well, I don't know. it looks all right if I don't think about it much. That's the problem, and that's the area.
Last question, if I've understood this. Given the replication crisis, do we not think humans are just as, if not more, capable of our own hallucinations? One to end on.
We had a hallucination. Well, no, we don't know if it's. We had a reference in this that we had to pull out because we couldn't figure out where we got it from.
I was trying
which
to.
then led us to kind of go, no, but it was you. No, it's me. It's you.
And we can't remember. But that also brings back to the issue of bias and all those kinds of subjectivity and everything. Some of the things that qualitative researchers have historically been criticised for. And so I think all of these things are interrelated. And that's why it's really important, isn't it, to be critical thinkers and always to question what we're doing, why we're doing, and also to question the interpretations that we generate, however we generate them. And so all of those things are completely intertwined with technology and methodology, I think.
Back to the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Christina and Steve, thank you so much. Fascinating tour through that. Lots to think about.
Thank you.